Welcome to Front Street's At the Table. I'm Ray. This is my buddy Stephan. We both serve as pastors over there. Front Street at Burlington United Methodist Church. Thank you for tuning in. And for all you home folks, make sure you share because who knows, maybe some words that we share can be an invitation to others to know the Christ we serve. We've been dealing, well, first of all, let me just tell you a little bit At the Table. We started a series several weeks ago called At the Table. And we kind of decided this is what we're going to call our midweek opportunities at the table. And because at the table is where it's a holy place. It's a place where we share together, where we're real, where we share food together. And it's where Jesus the Christ invites us to come. When you sit at the table, remember me. And so that's what we're doing is every week we just want to remind people to be at the table, to be fresh, to all that sort of stuff. So, Stephan, we've been the past 2 weeks now. I forgot how long many weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks, yeah. We're talking with this, talking about the guy Joseph, and how he is living in this liminal space, threshold living.
Well, I just want to hear from you. How have the last couple of months changed for you? How did it start, and where are you now?
Well, starting was shocking.
Yep.
You know, and we've shared that with people. How even the guy behind the camera, he was with me the day I found out I was moving, and the shock of that. And I wasn't even supposed to tell him, but I was so shocked that I'm like, oh, I've got to talk about this. And Jill wasn't there, and he was. We were getting ready to film. But you know, coming to Front Street has been a really wonderful experience, and the thing that has in the transition has helped me so much. I mean, true, not make your head too big, but your presence, our team's presence, and the warmth of this congregation has really been a surprising gift to Jill and me. So those things have been a tremendous gift, and how warm and open and caring, and I mean, also just how the team, our team at church, the staff, just go to work, do what we had to do, and so that's been refreshing.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that.
Well, I'm glad too.
Well, and life has changed a lot for you aside from work, also living arrangements. You're in your new house now. Yeah. How does that feel?
It feels chaotic right now.
Okay.
I mean, not as chaotic as it did the week previous because we were living in an Airbnb out of suitcases. We're still somewhat living out of suitcases, but we're neck deep in boxes. Got a lot of them unpacked, but not all of them. But, you know, it's part of the transition.
Yeah.
You kind of expect it. You know, you're going to live in this space that everything's not the way you want it.
Well, and I wonder about that for you. You've been in this process working with the Methodist Church for longer than myself, and so having gone through a number of transitions already, is there a way that you've prepared for that? Is there something that you've done to help it get a little easier each time?
Well, I'm not sure you can ever really, for me, prepare for it. I think you have to be open. And for us, we have to be open to live in the space and know that it's okay to live in this chaotic, not so organized space and time. I think for me, because I'm old, I don't feel like I have to have answers for Front Street or for anybody. I don't feel the urge to have all knowledge and wave a magic wand and everything be good or whatever. I also have the comfort to know that, you know, I had you and the team and Ross, the previous lead pastor, and before him, Ray Whitman and all the others, and Marshall Lowell. We have some pastors still at Front Street. So I can remember being overwhelmed with the sense when I went to the church in Chapel Hill that this church has been here 200 years. It will survive me. It'll surpass me.
Yeah.
And I'd really have to try to mess it up.
Yeah.
And that it's going to be okay. And that the people gathered there, they're probably a lot smarter than you are. Lean into them. Trust them. So that's kind of where I've leaned into over the years, is trusting where I'm going, trusting the system, our Methodist system, and trusting what God has laid on my heart, because it was shocking to be moving, but at the same time, I just have come to believe this is what, for my former church,
Yeah.
it's what they needed, even though I don't think I or they knew that or understood that. And coming to Front Street, I think, is something that maybe Ray needed, and hopefully and prayerfully, something Front Street can use. You know, again, Front Street's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So hopefully, you, the team, and we all can help.
So I see all that as a hope and a prayer for you and for Front Street, and of course for White Plains as well.
Yeah.
And gosh, there's so much to unpack in that, and it relates so well to how I imagine Joseph might have been feeling during this time of transition for him.
Can you imagine? Joseph had this dream. Well, he didn't have the dream. Pharaoh had the dream, asked Joseph to interpret the dream, which he did. Mm-hmm. And then the head guy turns to you and says, "You're in charge."
That's right.
It's like, whoa, dude, I'm just the interpreter. I ain't the doer. But Joseph gets pinned with,
Yeah.
you know, but also, I mean, the unbelievable thing is, and I don't know if for those people who are students of Scripture, they would have, they do not, when Pharaoh hands him his ring and puts on his robe, that was giving him, Pharaoh was giving Joseph all authority that he had. But I have authority over you.
And there's still some strangeness for Joseph in this moment, because he's been in prison for 13 years now. He's 30 years old. He's lived away from his family for so long. And now he's in this new position of seeming authority. And we've been dealing with this idea of liminal space in between, a place of the old has ended and the new has yet begun. And you might imagine that Joseph is finally here, past that threshold, past that liminal.
Yeah, I think maybe if you're reading, you're like, oh, wow, Joseph is finally getting
That's right. Yeah.
kind of what, you know, bless his heart, he's get out of jail.
Yeah, we feel like we got past the climax. Yeah. We're on the downhill slope now. The story's about to end nicely. But there's still a lot of contention that comes.
Oh, man.
That's
and
really
also,
the only beginning of it.
Yeah, it's only the beginning, really. I mean, all the other stuff is almost the prep time. Here he is, for having 26 years, I don't know, I mean, a long time. My gut is he's come to the conclusion in his life, Joseph, that I'm not going to see my birth family anymore. I have my job. I'm living in my city. I'm in charge. All is really good. What else can I ask for? Mm-hmm. Here I was sold into slavery, and I'm in charge of everything. I mean, the truth is, what else could he ask for? I mean, good Lord, you would think, well, somebody meant this for ill, but God is using it for good.
After having lived, it seems, another 14 years, 7 years of the fertile land, 7 more years of famine, and he's bringing his own family, who he's been distant from at this point, oh gosh, I can't do the math, 13 plus another 13. Yeah,
26 years. But really, he doesn't bring them in as much as they come to him.
True.
Because
they have nowhere else to go either.
They have their where they have lived and prospered is now evidently pretty desolate because of the famine, because of, we assume there's no water or little water, and so they come to Joseph because he's the one giving out the goods,
the money, the grain, whatever it was.
Yeah, right, yeah, and so they could survive, and they have no idea. His brothers that sold him into slavery have no idea that it's Joseph.
The tension picks back up, and there's a back and forth between, are the brothers going to figure it out? Is Joseph going to tell them? Yeah. And for about a chapter and a half, this builds.
And Joseph kind of keeps them on edge himself.
Yeah.
We don't know how long it was between when they first arrived and when he reveals himself. But I don't know about you, but I think that Joseph came to a place where he said, oh my Lord, I thought everything was good, and now, as you were saying, we think we've gotten to that place. And all of a sudden, just the blinders come off when he thinks, oh my Lord, you're still working.
Yeah.
You had more things to do. I had no idea I would be reconciled, that my family would be redeemed. And I don't know about you, I think this is where all this emotion is. That he's just, holy moly, what is this? You know?
It's almost as if his eyes are open to the reality that's always been around him. And gosh, how often do we ask for that, but still close our eyes to the reality that's in front of us?
Yeah.
That we are in liminal spaces.
And yes, and it just amazes me that he, after what his brothers did to him, somehow in all this process, he was able to forgive and came to the place where forgiving and also saying, God used it for good. You know, when I think about thresholds, as we've been talking and preparing, once again, I'm reminded of the triathlon.
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you on that one specifically. So my backstory is I love triathlons because I grew up around them. My dad is a triathlete.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. And basically every vacation we ever went on when I was a kid was because he had a triathlon there.
How wonderful.
I love him for it.
Yeah.
And I remember the conversations that he would have around preparing for triathlons. And of course, a lot of it was getting exercise in, making sure he's biking, swimming, and running for all the different activities. But one of the biggest ones for him and for many of his friends that did triathlons was to prepare for that transition, that boxed in area where swimmers would run in and put on their biking gear and then head out. And then they'd come back in and take their bike gear off and put their running gear on and head out. That space right there was so vitally important to them.
They have to change their mindset, don't they?
Entirely.
Well, we could talk about it or we can watch some of it.
Let's do it.
All right, let's watch some. You know, my important job at the triathlon was one of the team that runs it.
Yeah.
She told me, she said, when they're coming out of the water, remind them to touch their helmet first, the helmet for their biking. Because if they didn't do that first, which evidently she said was a very normal thing, they get penalties for that.
Right.
And so maybe you're the first in the race, but if you have enough penalties against you, you don't get the gold prize.
That's right.
You know, and so my job, my huge, horrible job was, don't forget to touch your helmet first.
Yes.
That was my job. But
And
to help them in their
easy, simple
transition.
one. Oh, it's so important.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're not thinking about anything other than moving from one place to the next at that.
Yeah, and they're exhausted.
Yeah. So I want to bring that question back around to you.
Yeah.
I asked you earlier just kind of basically, what do you do to prepare for transitions?
Yeah.
I wonder if there is a voice in your head, somebody that has helped guide you that has that touch your helmet reminder for you.
Yeah. Well, I think I maybe have touched on it a moment ago in that a pastor friend of mine who is dead now, is deceased, he called me on the Saturday night prior to one of my churches, my first Sunday, and he said, remember, it's not all on you, and you're not alone.
Yeah.
And it all is going to be, he didn't say, all right, he said, it all will be good.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that keeps things in perspective.
Yeah.
So that, because I remember up until that point, I felt like a church was all on me. You know, that's the reason at church I would polish the plants. It's the reason I had to make sure, you know, I would get there real early, make sure everything was in place, because I felt some stupid reason, I felt like if anything went wrong, it's a reflection on me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how silly. But it took somebody like that to push me past that.
So take church and pastor and that title that you walk into, and gosh, you've given so many people positive information about how they can touch their helmet and remember things in their own life as they're going through transitions. But there's, for Joseph, I think it's very similar to that. And while we can make a connection between Joseph and Jesus, there's certainly one there. I think for him, it was God the Father that he really relied on. Going through all of this, we talked about Joseph. It wasn't about the next place that he went to, the position that he had, but a state of being. In chapter 41, verse 16, there's a really awesome moment where we already said Joseph doesn't do a whole lot of talking, but right in between, as Pharaoh is giving him this dream, he asks him the question, Pharaoh says, can you interpret it?
Oh, yeah.
And Joseph says, no, I can't, but God can.
Yep, yeah. And that's it. I think that's what that pastor friend of mine was reminding me of.
Yeah.
This is God's, it's not yours.
Yeah.
It's not, this is God's place. This isn't your place.
Yeah.
You know, and then Jesus the Christ. I mean, you're talking about liminal living, as I mentioned in our message this past Sunday. Jesus the Christ, his whole life was giving for liminal space.
Right.
Transition space for him, for us. But he was willing to live in that liminal space, go to be crucified. The liminal space, only God knew what it was for his death and then subsequent resurrection. Right. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know what that was.
So there's something in there that's so important to this idea of liminality, liminal spaces, in between thresholds. It's the question of how do we get past it? How do we get out of it? How do we feel as though we're in the next place? And for Joseph and Joseph's story, time and time again, it's not about the place that he ends up. It's not about the position that he ends up holding.
He never tries for it.
It's not about even the relationships around him that he has. It is something within him, a state of being, a process that he is going through, an acceptance that he is continuously engaging with.
When he was understand he's in a threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
he's there. Yeah. As terrifying as it is to acknowledge that we live in liminal spaces, I hope and I pray that as people are listening along with us, that they see that connection, that Jesus is there with them every step of the way. Jesus understands, has been there and is here.
Yes, in the liminal spaces while we're living in our liminal spaces.
So we're going to spend some time, just a quick break, but then we're going to jump into the next part of this story. We may not think it actually connects Joseph's story with what's coming up, but it does a lot in powerful ways, and that is the Israelite story as they walk through the wilderness. So this is going to be a place for us to move a little bit past acknowledgement of liminal spaces and really dive into what it looks like to be and to not worry about the next place Joseph wasn't worried about, but to rely on God and faith and Jesus and the Holy Spirit for us, all of that meshing together in beautiful ways. So we invite everyone to walk alongside with us in that.
As the train whistle blows and blares, thank you for joining us at the table. It's always good having you.